Hello everyone, so today I want to talk about this topic that I thought was pretty interesting, and this is like how different is your job searching going to be from what before when you graduate from college or post grad, and then now to like after you've actually graduated and now you're like 2, 3 plus whatever years after you've graduated. Like the difference between an entry level versus experienced hiring process or process in general when searching for jobs. There's a lot of things that I wish I knew because just things that you don't really talk about when you're in college because you're either desperate for a job or you don't care or you just don't know what you like. So I really want to talk about that because I think this can really help you in terms of how to evaluate the process or in general, like what's a process for you. So the first thing I want to say is that I think there is a difference because going from entry level, you may not be as picky. You may not even know what you want to do. You may just want to go like, I'm going to go for the company because that's what I know is good for my future career, but you may not have cared that much about what's going to be the role or the job itself, unless maybe it's like a stepping stone towards something that you want to do. So one thing that I really want to mention because of that is that once you're an experienced hire, it means you have actual work experience to go back off. You probably have a few things you don't like about the job, about the company, about the people, like that kind of stuff. And then maybe even things that you do like that you know that you thrive in this environment. So because of that, you may be pivoting around. You don't know exactly where to go. And I think this is really important because what I didn't realize, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in the interview section, is that it's not necessarily they're looking for people now. You have to think about it in the way that you're looking for a company, or think about it as like finding a home. Not exactly a home, like that's a bit toxic too, actually. When people say work hard, play hard, there's like a little bit gray area about what that means. But I would say that like it's very different because how you are sourced, how your market value in the industry and like in the job market is. What values do you have and how much is the fit? Because I think now that you're an experienced hire, you can actually choose to be picky. Because before you're like, oh my God, I have like these student loans, I need to find a job or else I'm gonna be jobless and be in my parents' basement, and it's no problem being in your parents' basement, honestly, if as long as you have a good relationship with your family. But I would say that like when you're an experienced hire, you can actually say, oh, I could stay in my job as long as I want, or maybe like you made enough money that you saved and you could quit and then just have like some soul searching time or have your time to actually go look for a job. The motivations are different, the approach is different, and the first thing I want to start off is like, how do you even find these opportunities in the first place? I think like a big thing that I did not know actually was that even when you're not looking for a job, you should still be networking. You should still be meeting people, and this way you can expand your network, and eventually when you think that you are looking for a time, or maybe you want to just expand it and you don't know what opportunities are out there until they come to you. Honestly, a lot of recruiters have been knocking down my door that I didn't even know like these roles would be something that I would be able to do in the first place. Like there was one that's like chief of staff, like chief of staff. I've never even thought about that in the first place. But then I looked at the job description, like it looks pretty good. I didn't do it though, because it's like it would require me to relocate in Seattle. But it's like roles like that where you don't even know what is actually something that you would consider until they come knocking down your door. So you want to make sure that, number 2, optimize your LinkedIn. This is so crucial, I think, for a lot of people now that you're experienced hires, you're trying to pivot towards something, or you're just trying to see what's the next big thing. Maybe you're like completely happy with your job or your company, which is basically what I'm doing right now, but you're just like curious about what's out there without actually putting in the effort. In this case, optimize your LinkedIn so you get a recruiter knocking down your door about like what you're interested in, like maybe optimize it in the way, and I'm gonna probably do a separate video on this, but optimize it in particular keywords or experiences or titles that would appeal to the job that you're looking for. So you can have to like reverse engineer like what you're looking to go into or like the types of jobs that you're going into. Let's say you're going from technical and you're going to creative. If that's the case, then you may want to look at the creative jobs out there, look at what they're looking for, kind of boost that up in your current experiences and skills and whatnot. Even maybe post up some creative works into your LinkedIn, like all that kind of stuff would definitely help. And because of that, you're optimizing your LinkedIn to be searched. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. The other one is referrals. And if you keep on expanding your network, you will eventually may be like, oh, like I saw that so-and-so is a product manager at Google. Okay, I'm going to go reach out to them. And you have to make sure that it's like natural. It's not like something that you just like connected and then that's it. You want to actually be able to reinforce that relationship. And I actually do keep like some kind of sheet going on of like what area they're in, what company they're from, how did I meet them, what were the last discussion points that I talked about, what were some takeaways, and then each time, like if I were to reach back out to them, I can see like what was the last thing that we discussed, and maybe even the timestamp as well, because like, oh, it's been a while. I don't want to just say hey and then just be all of a sudden like, well, who are you? You want to be able to warm that up. And networking is really important because you want to be able to be strategic strategic. I think a lot of times before I even started my job at Accenture, I thought like, oh, you just network when you want to meet people, or you just want to network when you are looking for a new job, but you can do it, just do it, on the side. And I think like another thing is that you could interview even when you're not looking for a job. I think it's like a good practice to see, like, first of all, it's a good way to see like what's your value out there in the market. For me, I have like the traditional mindset a lot of people have if you're coming from like an immigrant family, that you stay at your company for like over a few decades, because that's just comfort. That's just stable income. And honestly, if you do that all the time, you might be pigeonholing yourself, especially if you're young in your 20s. I was like, I'm 26 right now. Like, this is the time to be looking around if I had to. I don't have to commit to anything. Just go through the interview process. And if I actually end up liking it in the process, then maybe I'll go for it. Nothing hurts. Like, you're not accepting the offer. If anything, like whatever you're doing in your job, it doesn't have to be affected at all. It's just really, be really cautious about your time though. If you're just spending too much time doing your job hunting or in general just looking around, then maybe it will affect your day-to-day job. But I just do this on the side to kind of figure out like what's out there. And I only recently just did this because I love my job and I love my company at Accenture. But the thing is, like, what is out there, you will never know until you start networking with people or even interview, because sometimes that's the only way to find out about those roles that you don't know anyone from. And then another one is I want to talk about is a lot of recruiters actually look for people coming from key industries or key people. So a lot of times, like let's say Accenture is a big feeder company a lot of people like to recruit from. They may be looking for key people from Accenture, or they may be looking for key areas like Workday. Maybe they want to do it for someone who's like an application tech lead or something like that. Not even something I am familiar with, but like let's say it's regarding financial integrations and it's not Workday, but it's ERP. They may be targeting for that kind of people. So I would open up your horizons to that, because you may not even know what are the fields out there until they come out. Like there's a few things that came out. I was like, what's a solutions engineer? What is that? I didn't even know about that. And then I had to talk to a few people in the tech industry about what that is. And I didn't even know that job existed. So it's good to just keep your eyes open to everything. Now the actual application process. So this is really important if you're trying to pivot away from what you're currently doing, is find something that's familiar to you, and you don't have to highlight every single thing. Like let's say if I were to talk about all 3 years at Accenture, you would have like 10,000 like bullet points of everything, like either what you did or what you achieved. And even what you achieved, how do you actually fit everything into one page? And that's where you have to actually think about tailoring your actual resume towards the actual application or company or role in general. So a lot of times, like it may be fine-tuning some keywords that they have in their job description, or maybe looking for some keywords that that they're looking for, but they're not actually looking at it. So if maybe like for sure it's a startup, technically a lot of startups, they do have like people actually looking at it. And then from that, like maybe there's like, you see that they're trying to launch a social community, and for that reason you want to highlight a social community. It may not have been asking about it in their actual job description, but you may want to highlight it a little bit, especially during the interview process. This does require you to do a lot of research. That's why I always recommend you to definitely do your research on the types of companies you're looking for in terms of culture and the environment, the role, all that kind of stuff. And then see, like, now after you have that information, find the role that's right for you. Don't apply to every single thing blindly, because then you're just going to waste so much energy. You want to focus on ones that, like, if you were to get an interview, would you actually take it if you got the offer? You don't just want to do like, whatever. If it's like something that you're planning on using as like maybe leverage, just to see like what's going on out there, like either against your current company or against like a competing offer, then maybe sure, but then those tend to be a little bit harder to get and go through and really convince them. I personally only like to work at companies that I actually truly care for and really value, because then I will feel like I'm thriving. So for me, that's just how it's like for me. Maybe for you it'll be different, but I always like to say that if you think that the role or the job or the environment or the company is perfect for you, most likely when you apply, they're going to see the same, because it's just a good fit. It shouldn't be that hard to really say like you're a great fit, to fit like a square piece into a circle. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure it's a circle to circle. And then you maybe like a smaller circle, and then you just grow and expand as you grow in the role. So another thing that I want to say is that like in their interview process, this is where it gets very different, because when you're coming from like entry level, you may not get an HR screening. I think like honestly, a lot of the jobs that I've had no HR screening. It went straight to an interview process that like the recruiter said, okay, we're going to take you for an interview process, and then you go straight to a group of people who are going to be interviewing you. And a lot of times, like I actually realized The people that I've been interviewing with are not the hiring managers either. But moving forward, when you're leaving your job and you're going for a new job or whatnot, you're going to have an HR screening, and this is where they want to set your expectations. This is actually something that I was so scared about. I was like, oh, I'm going to be getting behavioral questions, but HR screening is not really like that, at least for my experience, because they're like asking, what's your salary expectation? Tell me about yourself, or give me a little bit of your, or like, why are you leaving your current job? Or what are kind of like job experiences that you have that would relate to this role? Like, any questions about this is like super informal, and in the end I honestly didn't even prepare for all of them. I just prepared for maybe like one or two of them, learning a little bit like what kind of questions to ask, but I always have these questions in my head anyway, so I don't really prepare for it really. HR screening, not as bad as I thought it would be. The other one is like the next round, technically, with like the phone interview and your first video call is going to be with your hiring manager, which means the person that you're going to end up reporting to when you start. And in a lot of the interviews that I had before I actually started weren't like that. And especially in consulting, if you're doing that for consulting, this is a very high chance that person's not going to be your direct report, because it's always going to be like with your project or your people lead / career counselor / HR partner. Like, I don't even know, the terms are always different within all the firms, but it's always going to be different. And a lot of consulting firms like just pulling people from whoever's available because of just that's how they're structured. But if it's like a traditional company, it could be tech, it could be like a nonprofit, it could be any of those. They typically have the hiring manager as the person that sees your resume and say, okay, let's see, I'm interested. And then you talk to them. And then this is where they move you forward into the future rounds. So where either like they have executives or adjacent partners that are working with this team member that they're hiring, all these kind of things. So that's something that was really different to me, is that now I actually know who the hiring manager is. In the past, like when you're in college, you're like, who's the hiring manager? Like, you don't even know how to even start looking for this. But this is where you start. You can actually ask the recruiter for that. I've had recruiters that literally told me these are the hiring managers, and that I just like snoop around on LinkedIn. You also want to focus on stories and experiences that really relate to the job or the role or even the company. Like, I'll think a lot of times in college, we're like talking about our extracurriculars, our class projects, and we're just going to give anything that works. But now you have actual experience to leverage. Let's say you're like a school custodian and you're trying to go for like a product manager role. And it's probably going to be very hard for you to understand, like, how do I even do that? But then you also have to think about like cross-functionally. When do I work with many different stakeholders? You probably have worked with many different stakeholders. You have the students at a school, you have administration, you have other custodians, you have like maybe when you have a big event like prom at the school gym, you have to work with all these different people. May not be the best because that it's not necessarily in like a corporate environment, but this is something that you want to bring up to the light. And the kind of questions that you can look up for is that, like, if you look at the job description, you can see what they're valuing. Are they valuing collaboration? Are they valuing client facing? Are they valuing maybe the subject matter knowledge of advertising, something like that? And then you just prepare for questions that you can think of, the kind of questions that they're going to provide you. They may not tell you the format, but a lot of times, like if it's like a bigger company, you'll find that information online. If it's a smaller company, just be a little bit more relaxed, because they generally don't have that much structure. They're just going to ask you pretty simple questions, or they're going to ask you like very targeted questions in the areas that they're looking for. And this is why like I like to ask a lot of questions in like the first 2 rounds, either with the HR screening or the hiring manager, because then you can really see what they value for, and this can actually help you do better in future questions. And that way, when you get a question about like maybe what your 5-year plan for this role, then you can see before when it was like, oh, when you asked earlier questions on how do you see this role evolving, you can kind of tailor your answer to that. And then another thing that you want to do is like the questions you ask are super critical. As I said, like before, if you're a student, you're maybe just like choosing whatever is out there or whatever is available so you can get paid, and then that way you can pay your student loans or move out of your parents' place, all that kind of stuff. But this is where I think it's so critical, because at this point of your career, either you're late stage or you're early stage, but you're still out of college and you've had like 1 or 2 or at least some experience in some case or capacity. These are the questions to ask, because you want to make sure that they're good for you. Because a lot of times, like for example, if I were to interview for a startup and I'm trying to get into product management, but I'm the first product manager, I don't think that's a good environment for me to learn about product management, right? So you want to ask about those kind of questions, and definitely check out the video over here, because I'm actually going to be doing a video just on the types of questions to ask to evaluate parts about a particular role or an opportunity. And that way, when you can see that, you can see like, is this really right for me? You don't want to just pick the right first thing that comes out here. To be honest, like I did get an offer, but I said no because all the factors just did not work out for me, is because I asked all these questions up front, and then that way I knew what I was getting myself into. And then when I looked at the compensation, I realized it didn't match up with the experience I was looking for. And another thing is that you want to come in with the interviews, like the first round, the HR screening, with what your target pay is. I look at like what your current pay is, what are some things that you don't want to get rid of, like maybe you want 401k matching, and that's something that you put up as like either something that you can negotiate, or look for a company that does 401k matching. Because the last thing you want to do is that you go through the entire process, you get an offer, and maybe like half the things that you wanted are not even there, and then you decline it. So that's why you want to know like what you're coming in for. What's your minimum base pay? What's like the structure that you're going for? Do you want options? Do you want RSUs? Do you want ESPP? Or do you want in general, like maybe you don't even care about that. Maybe you care about career growth and you're just using this as a stepping stone. For that, you may be like, okay, maybe I'll be willing to take a pay cut. And sometimes like if you do a pay cut, make sure that you're actually going to like it, because evaluate your like your cost of living and see, do I think I can make it? If you can, then go for it. But a lot of times you want to do this before you even start the interview, because a lot of times with the HR screening, they might ask you like, oh, can you tell me like what's your salary expectation? The best answer, don't give a number, but you can ask like what's your range. And then if you see that the range doesn't even fall close to where you're going for, then you could say, okay, it looks like it's out of my range, and you drop from there. If you don't even ask a question like that, you go to the very end and you get disappointed you wasted all this time. I've actually even had a time where I had an interview, final round interview scheduled for 4.5 hours. I'm like, oh, that's so long, and I don't even know like if I want this, because of the base pay was not even the range that I was looking for. It's okay, it's not ideal. And then when I'm like comparing it to my current other opportunities out there, I'm like, no, this is just not gonna work. So that's something you want to come in, because I've wasted a lot of time in the beginning from not knowing this information. I was just like, I'm open. I'm like, but truly I was not open. I live in New York City, so there's a lot of things I have to worry about with making sure I can make the pay and also be able to have a comfortable lifestyle for me to do YouTube video like this without feeling like I have to rush through things. So that's really important to know. And I think like you also need to kind of see like, what are you willing to give up? Do you want to go fully remote, but then you have no exposure to the office or to the members? You could probably do remote. Another thing is like benefits. Like if you go for a startup, your benefits may not be that great. Or if you go for early stage startup, like maybe it may not even be that stable. You may actually have to even give up a lot of things. So early stage startups, they're either looking for super experienced people to take it off the ground, because like if they don't do well, then the company doesn't do well. They may have to lay off some people. The other option is that like if maybe that you're just looking to grow and you're looking to learn, and then they have no support system, then that's also going to be an issue. But definitely check out the video about all the questions that I would plan to ask, or like some ideas. Like if you have any other questions, just let me know. But thank you so much, everyone. These are just the kind of things that I thought of when you're going through like an interview process or a job hunting process, and they just don't really know what's different or what to expect compared to like when you're in college, because there's a lot of things here. Like I said before, a lot of my family, they kind of stay in like companies for a few decades, or they go into like unconventional jobs that I don't really have that knowledge of. And because of that, I don't have that lessons learned kind of thing. So I'm doing it now, and that I'm like really thinking about the process. And these were the things that I wish I knew earlier, so that way I could either save some time or have a stronger process. Thank you guys, everyone, and see you guys next time. Bye.